All right, everyone. Hi, and welcome to our Power Hour today. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Caitlin Maffeo, and I'm really excited. I'm here at the district with a new role in family and community engagement. I was previously a teacher at Gulfview Elementary, and I'm just really honored to support all of the families in VPS. I would like to thank my friends Ginny and Javon for all of their mentorship and support throughout this transition for me. And I'm just really fortunate to be able to learn from them. So let's go through some ground rules before we start. So Ginny and Javon will be monitoring the chat during this Power Hour today. And so questions will be taken at the end of Tasha's presentation. We want to respect everybody's time. And so it's not necessarily a time for personal stories, more of just questions for the good of the group. Also, for security reasons, we want to make sure that cameras and microphones stay in the off position during this Power Hour today. Also, this presentation is recorded, so that's good news. We're going to be able to share this on YouTube, and you guys can send it to anybody that you see fit, anybody that missed this presentation today. And also, you can email me, and we'll put that in the chat if you want it directly sent to you rather than just going on YouTube. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce to you guys Tasha Thomas. She is our presenter here from Care on Treatment Centers. So, a little intro on Tasha. She is currently sharing her passion to help others working as a student assistant specialist with Care on Treatment Centers, where she has worked for 5 years. Also in this role, she has provided nicotine cessation prevention and intervention services to youth and schools and parents in the greater Orlando area. Also, prior to her work at Care On, she spent the past 20 years, wow, Tasha, that's crazy, providing support and services to at-risk youth in the Orlando community, including 9 years as a school counselor. Tasha received her bachelor's of science and degree in communications from the Florida State University. I will forgive you for that later. Go Gators. She also holds a master's degree in school guidance counseling, which, wow, what an introduction to such an incredible woman. Also, thank you to Lee McElroy from Eckerd Connect for connecting us and making this entire presentation possible today. We really do appreciate it. And I would love to give the floor to Tasha at this time.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Am I sound good, Caitlin?
Oh yeah, you sound great.
Okay. Well, when I hear an intro like that, it kind of, you go, wow, that's pretty cool. When it boils down to it though, I am just like many of you, a parent, someone who loves working with youth, and my goal is just to do whatever I can to help students and to help them make the best choices possible. So let's go ahead and jump right into what we're going to do today. Our objective for today is to kind of talk about some tools, resources, conversation starters to help you all in whatever role you play with youth to be able to start that conversation about substance use at home. And it's so important because parents and caregivers are truly the #1 influence for their child. And so I hope today you'll be able to take away 1 or 2 nuggets that are helpful for you. I want to start though with asking you to kind of think back in the day, back to when you were a teen. For some of us, that was a really, really long time ago. For others of us, maybe not so long ago, but if you can, share in the chat, what was life like? Was it fun? Did you spend a lot of time outdoors? Things were really different when we were young. Simple things like our phones had cords, right? For me, when I was growing up, my mom would say, go outside, come back when the street lights can't come on. And gossip was spread by word of mouth. So if I did something at school and, other people saw it, it kind of lived in that moment. Maybe a few people talked about it the next day. But things are really, really different now when we think about the kids and what they're living through. So if we think about how things are today, I think most of you would agree with me that technology has changed everything. So we communicate through our devices. We are gossip, pictures, information, it's all sent in an instant. So for example, if you have a young person, they get into, a fight at school or something embarrassing happens, guess what? It lives on online, forever. They have to kind of relive those moments. Social media dominates. We know that for our young people, so many people spend their time on social media. And it's not like back in the day. I see in the chat where Adrian talked about a party line phone. I remember those where people could listen in on the phone calls. You play outside all day. Now, most people are spending their time indoors. They've got, Facebook, TikTok, all of these other things, more than just the 3 channels on TV, right? That we were used to back when we were younger. The other thing that has changed, though, is that access to drugs and the way that teens can use drugs has also changed. So now a young person could possibly access drugs just by going on to social media. I remember working with some students who were in quarantine in Pennsylvania, and I was asking them, how is it that you're getting access to drugs? And they were doing that through social media, through things like TikTok and Snapchat. And just like we're getting our groceries delivered by Instacart, they would get their drugs delivered in their neighborhood by a complete stranger online. And I say those things because I think it's important for us to realize that although we have our own experience with what substance use was like when we were teens, just like the times have changed in terms of social media, times have changed as well in terms of access to drugs and the types of substances that kids can use. So I want to ask you to kind of think about this question. What do you think is the most abused drugs by teens? You can throw it in the chat. Is it A, nicotine, B, marijuana, C, Adderall, or D, alcohol? What do you think is the most abused drug by teens? I see Adderall. It's a good guess. Anybody else? What do you think is most commonly used? Nicotine? A couple for alcohol? Okay. All right. Let's see what the answer is, everybody. It's alcohol. Alcohol, and that's pretty much been tried and true for a long time. So let's kind of visit and talk a little bit about alcohol use among teens. The first part of our presentation today, we really are going to talk about some current trends, just so that you as a parent or caregiver are familiar with what's going on. And then we're going to dive into how we can help our kids to navigate this world. So when we think about alcohol, here's some of the latest data that we have on it. We see about 55% of seniors have said that they've used alcohol in the past year, and about 33 admit to alcohol use in the past month, 33% of seniors. Here's what stands out to me about this one. About 20% of 8th graders have said that they've used alcohol in the past year. So whenever we're doing these presentations, and I'm not a stats person, but whenever we look at data, what's always interesting to me is that, of course, the older the kids get, the greater access they have to any of these substances. But for 20% of 8th graders to say, hey, I've tried alcohol in the past year, that reminds us that we have to start young when we're talking to our kids about substance use. All right, so when we talk about alcohol, what are some current trends? Some things are old, some things are new. Alcohol is seen as a rite of passage. You know, the older you get, you're in 12th grade, you can go to parties, you can drink. You really, as parents and caregivers, we have to push back on that. There are other ways to consume alcohol now. You see the gummies up in the corner. Those are alcohol gummies. We also are seeing a rise in the spiked seltzers. So like the Mike Hard lemonades, the Trulies. These are things that kids can easily access. And a lot of our younger girls are using these products because they kind of don't feel like they're as bad as drinking a beer. And they can consume them easily, not realizing that some of these spiked seltzers have about 9% of alcohol in them. So that's pretty strong. You can see the shirt there that says, no one knows that my water bottle is actually full of vodka. And when I talk about alcohol use with the kids that I'm working with, those students that are currently using some of these products, I go, how do you even have access to it? So 2 tips I want to give for parents. One, uh, for us adults that have alcohol in our home, be sure you're monitoring your own alcohol, because what I'm hearing from some kids is that they will take that vodka, pour some water out, pour it out, pour some water in, and their parents may not know. The other thing that I'm hearing, besides getting it from other older kids, is that they may go over to a friend's house, and that friend's parents may have alcohol in their home that they're not monitoring. So when it comes to alcohol use, we have to have clear messages with our kids about our expectations, push back on this thought that, it's a rite of passage as you get older. In 12th grade is the thing for you to do, to drink with your friends, and especially monitor any alcohol that's not only in your home, but talking to other parents about what's going on in their home and your expectations. If you're sending your kid over to a friend's house for a get together, making sure you know that there's a parent there that's monitoring anything that's going on. The why this is important, if you look at that quote on there, youth who start drinking before the age of 15 are 5 times more likely to develop alcohol dependence than those that wait until they're about 21 years old, the legal drinking age. 5 times more likely. So that's why it's important for us to send the message to our children that they do not need to consume these products. It could actually lead to them being addicted a lot faster and stronger, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. Now I want to move on and talk about nicotine trends. Now, I'm sure if you look at the screen, some of these products are familiar to you. When I tell people that I work in nicotine cessation programs, they always ask me, do kids still smoke? Like, kids still smoke cigarettes? And the good news is that cigarette use has gone down, but we still have a lot of work to do. Nicotine continues to be one of the most dangerous substances that folks are using, causing preventable diseases. And so we still have a lot of work to do with nicotine use. We have had some great things that have happened, including the fact that now the age for tobacco is up to 21 years old, which is done to help prevent those younger kids from getting access to tobacco and nicotine. But e-cigarettes and vaping have definitely changed the game when it comes to nicotine use. So for today, I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking to you about these vape products so that you're more aware of what they are and what to look for. So let's start a little bit with some statistics. A few years ago, we saw this huge uptick in the amount of students who were using vape devices. E-cigarettes, vape devices were originally developed for adults with fully developed brains who were already addicted to cigarettes to help them reduce their use and cut back on the nicotine. But somehow it turned into this kind of, craze among youth to be able to try it. There was a lot of appeal there because there was no odor if they used these products. They came in all of these flavors that were appealing to youth, like Boom Boom Pop and Cinnamon Toast Crunch. And we saw these kids consuming these products, in particular things like Juuls, which I'm sure you've heard of, and they had no idea about what they were putting into their body. The good news is we've been doing a lot of good work. And so there has been a slight decline across the board in the amount of students that are vaping. But I've been in schools all week for the past month, just in and out of schools, talking to kids about the dangers of vaping, because we are finding kids are using them, vaping in the bathroom. They don't really understand the long-term impact. So we see about 34% of seniors have talked about vaping in the past year and 24% in the past month. And we also saw a slight decline in vaping of marijuana, which we'll talk about that in a bit. So why do kids want to vape in the first place? Well, part of the big appeal is the fact that they can do it in plain sight. I was actually at a store with my mom, and we were getting a cell phone, and I could hear the sound of someone vaping, and the gentleman that was working in the store vaped a couple of times, hit his vape device a couple of times, and my mom had no clue. When I left, I said, "Mom, do you realize he was vaping?" She goes, "No, I didn't smell anything." That's part of the appeal, right? So let's take a look at this video. It's called Hiding in Plain Sight, and I'd love for you to check this out. a great video. I love that it says parents do your homework. You're here on this training right now, so you're already doing your homework. But can you see how easy it is to have those devices in plain sight without someone, a teacher, an adult around you even knowing what that is? So I've got a question for you in the chat. One of the vaping devices is called a puff bar. It is disposable. What we saw happening with Juuls is that as people became more aware of what the Juuls were, and they start taking the flavors away from the Juul pods, which is a rechargeable device that kids were using to vape, they started using these disposable vaping devices. So one puff bar, and you're looking at them right there. What do you think? It contains the same amount of nicotine as a half a pack of cigarettes, 1 pack of cigarettes, 2 packs of cigarettes, or 4 packs of cigarettes. Put the letter in chat, thank you very much, of what you think the correct answer is. And I'm going to share what most of my students say. Okay, I see a lot of C's, which is great because that is the answer. Very good, Amy. 2 packs of cigarettes. Here is why this is so important for us to be aware of and share with our children as parents and caregivers. I just did 10 presentations in the past month with kids about vaping. They don't realize they're putting that much nicotine in their body. When they see peach ice flavor, that's what they're thinking. Oh, peach ice flavor, that sounds great. Ooh, cafe latte flavor. They don't realize that they're putting as much nicotine in their body as 2 packs of cigarettes. For the Juuls, which folks were using as well, they have the equivalency of about a pack of cigarettes. So again, our job as parents is to help them make informed decisions. So here you'll see the Juul and the Soren. These are examples of rechargeable devices that they can use over and over again. And then these are the disposable devices. There was a ban on flavor pods. So when Juuls came out, this was kind of the most popular product among teens, and you know, everybody got up in arms because we realized so many kids were using that. They put a ban on some of the flavors which were appealing to youth, and so because of that, that federal ban, we thought, okay, great, that's going to bring the amount of kids that are using Juuls down, and it did. Juul use did go down. However, there was a loophole, and so the disposable brands were not included in that. And so they still can offer flavor like OMG, which is orange mango guava, or other flavors to appeal to youth. And so we're seeing now about 53% of youth leaning towards these disposable devices because they weren't included in the loophole. Here's what I tell my students. Who do you think they're targeting with some of these flavors? They're not targeting a middle-aged mom like me. They're targeting our teens, they're targeting our young people because they want them to continue to use and get addicted to these products. So we have to let our young people know what's really in these products so that they can make the healthiest choices. We know that there's a great risk of addiction with these products because there's a high amount of nicotine. What I personally saw happening, especially with Juuls when they first came out, is I'd have a student go through, I don't know, a Juul in a day or two. And some of you on here that work with kids, you probably are familiar with that. You know, maybe a day or two, they go through an entire Juul pod, the disposable device. And I'd say, would you go through an entire pack of cigarettes in a day or two? And they go, no way, Miss Tasha. I know what's in there. They're dangerous. They don't realize that these products also contain dangerous chemicals like formaldehyde, which is used to embalm dead people, the same chemicals you can find in weed killer, the same chemicals you can find in acetone. They don't realize that in addition to nicotine, they're putting those same things into their body. There's also the risk of injuries and poisoning, especially with those, with the pods, the danger of inhaling the aerosol products, because we really don't know what the long-term effects are. We can tell you up and down, the kids can raise their hand and tell you this is the effect of smoking a cigarette. But when it comes to vaping, they're not aware of the long-term effects. And quite frankly, we aren't either because it's kind of a new product. But we do know that we want our kids to make the healthiest choices. So educating them on these devices is the most important thing. All right, let's move on to talk about marijuana. All right, so answer this one for me, true or false? There was a significant increase in overall marijuana use from 2019 to 2020. And you can put that in the chat. Do you think that is true or false? I see a true, some false. All right. Lots of truths. Would you guys be surprised to know it's actually false? Marijuana use continues to pretty much hold steady across the board. Where we are seeing some increase in use is obviously them vaping the devices. So in addition to being able to vape nicotine, they're also able to vape marijuana products, and that's where we're seeing more kids using. But marijuana use has pretty much held steady. So on the screen, you're probably looking at things that may, seem familiar to you, things that you've seen before. And then you might be seeing some things that you're going, okay, what exactly is that? So we've got the edibles, which are, extremely popular because with teens using edibles where they're able to have the THC being the portion of the marijuana or cannabis plant that causes them to have that sense of euphoria or to feel high. That THC extract is in the edibles, and they have so many different ways to consume them, from brownies to soda. I've seen potato chips, gummy bears, just so much information. I am using the Monitoring the Future survey. Thank you very much for your question about sources, Jennifer. The Monitoring the Future survey, and we also use their Youth Risk Behavior survey for our information. And I'll be happy to send you a link to some of that information as well. But with the edible products, a lot of the times the teens don't realize when they're consuming them that they are going to experience a high because it's delayed. So if they are to smoke a blunt or a joint, they're used to getting that immediate effect. However, when it comes to an edible, when they consume it, they don't get that immediate effect of that sense of euphoria or high. And so what ends up happening is that they consume more. And so I've seen young people that I work with get really, really sick from using edibles and consuming them. We also see things like oils, waxes, and dabs. And that stands out because this is where they're using the extract. So they're extracting the THC from the cannabis plant. And so the level of THC in some of these extracts that they then can vape or smoke are upwards of 95%. So to put that into perspective, when we talk about 95% back in the day, and I know we talk about back in the day a lot, back in the day when we talk about use in the 80s and the 90s, the average level of THC concentration that folks would find in the THC was about 3%. Now it's common to find cannabis with about 20% THC content. Oils, wax, and dabs can reach about 95% THC content. So when we think about that, think about the impact that would have on a developing brain. So I've often told folks that this is not your mama's marijuana. This is not the marijuana that maybe was thought of back in the day, because sometimes I run into parents and go, oh, it's no big deal. These plants are being genetically modified to be stronger, and so they can have a greater impact on a youth that we serve. And I see in the chat issues with gummies in middle schools. And so again, it's really important for us to get this information out there about how dangerous these products can be. And higher potency obviously can lead to accelerated addiction and risk for mental health. Teens who start using before age of 18 are up to 7 times more likely to become addicted to those who wait. And I know oftentimes we get the question, oh, but is there really any harm in marijuana use? Are there really any dangers in marijuana use? And yes, there are dangers in marijuana use. At the treatment center that I work for care and treatment centers, one of the number one reasons that teens are being admitted to our treatment center is for cannabis use disorder. We're seeing so many kids coming in addicted to marijuana, and that has definitely been on the rise for us as a treatment center. We know that the higher level of THC, so that part of the cannabis plant that causes a sense of euphoria, is going to mean a higher rate of addiction. 1 in 6 teens who are using become dependent. And there's this distinction between being psychologically dependent and physically dependent. And we're going to talk about this in a bit too. For the young people that I work with, when I ask them about their marijuana use, oftentimes they become addicted to how it makes them feel, or more so, they become addicted to what it makes them not feel, right? The escape. And so that's where we're kind of seeing a lot of increase in use. We also know THC can impact the part of the brain where memory is formed, impacts problem solving. A lot of the young people I work with, amotivational syndrome is a big deal. They go from students that care about their grades to not really caring at all, not really wanting to be connected to others, and their use becomes the biggest thing. One message I like to get out there is we talk to kids all the time about don't get in the car with someone who's drinking and driving. We need to also share with our kids that they shouldn't go in the car with someone who's high, who's under the influence of marijuana, because it impacts their coordination and reaction time as well. And so we want to make sure we get the message out there that marijuana use is dangerous for young people, especially with their developing brains. And we need to talk to our kids in reality about the impact of marijuana use and what it could do to them, because it can be harmful. One of the reasons why the risk is so great is because the brain doesn't fully develop until what age? You can throw it in the chat. I'm sure you all know that. About 25 is what we're hearing. Okay. So because the brain is not fully developed, that means that the young people using these substances are at a greater risk for addiction and a greater risk for damage to their developing brain. Yes, it is older for males. That is very true. When I work with students, the boys never want to hear that one. They're like, what? But yes, it does have an impact on their developing brains. Here's how I explain it to the kids that I work with. And this might be helpful for you if you have maybe younger kids or you're explaining it to your teens. It's like with your body, if they think about it, their voice has changed from the time that they've been a teenager to when they were in third grade. Their shoes size has changed. They've gotten taller. And so in the same perspective, their brain is still changing, growing, and developing. That part of their brain that is really popping right now as a teenager is a part of their brain that's like, let's take the risk, let's have fun, forget about all of the consequences. We don't even know what they are. But the part of their brain that hasn't fully developed yet is that prefrontal cortex that's responsible for them to think about long-term consequences, to kind of, reason through things. That part doesn't develop until well into their 20s. And so what I tell young people is that because your brain is still developing, you can pick up learning things so quickly. You can learn the new TikTok dance quickly. You can learn a language quickly or music, but your brain can also pick up addiction very quickly. Addiction meaning using a drug or substance despite knowing how harmful it is and not being able to stop on your own without help. And it's like baking a cake, and your brain is still developing, and you're this amazing, cake with all these great ingredients, and you stick it in the oven, you're waiting for it to develop until in your 20s, but then you pull it out and put all these dangerous chemicals in there. Can it possibly change the development of your brain? Absolutely. Can it give you long-term impact? Absolutely. Now, if you have young people like the ones that I work with, they're going to push back on you, which I think that's great. And they're going to say, so you're saying that everybody that smokes weed or everybody that uses drugs is going to have these types of things happen to them? And I'm always honest with them. And I say, no, I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that using increases your risk. And what we want to do is decrease our risk for those harmful things. So every time that someone smokes marijuana or uses alcohol or uses that vape device, their risk of addiction or of some of the harmful health consequences or of some of the legal consequences continues to go up. And so I would invite you to have those conversations with the young people in your life and allow them to ask questions and push back. Now, when you're thinking about as a parent, what can I do to help my child? Because you can hear all this information, go, this is overwhelming. But the truth of the matter is, one of the things that we have in our control is to kind of pad our kids with protective factors. And so on the screen, on the brown part, I want you to look at that and see, give yourself a check, like, okay, these are things that I'm doing. And on the red circle, these are things that are going to make kids more at risk to possibly use. So things like known parental disapproval. I wish I could have put the word known in bold. Known meaning that your child knows what your thoughts are about substance use in your home. Your child knows how you as their parent or caregiver feels. That's a protective factor. That's the padding that kind of would protect them for some of these riskier behaviors. Having friends that don't use is a protective factor for someone who a teenager who might be exposed to use. Healthy role models is a protective factor. Ask your kids who their role models are. Ask their kids if they know what the word role model means. Sometimes their role models might not be someone in your home. It might be a celebrity, and you want to find out who that is and why. Having a strong school connection is a protective factor, and understanding harm, which you being here today helps you to be able to facilitate that message to them so they know the harms and the risks that are out there. Some risks, some things that can make students or young people more at risk would be using at an early age. So what we know is that the earlier someone is when they use, because of that developing brain, the more likely they are to have the risk for addiction. Another risk factor would be childhood trauma. And so if you've been in a situation where your child has experienced some trauma, getting the help and support that is needed to support them is going to be really important. Poor school connection. Ask your kids who they would go to at school if they had a bad day, who they feel comfortable with at school talking through difficult things. Are they involved in clubs and activities? Those things could be risk factors if they have a poor school connection. And then access obviously is a big thing. So if nothing else from this presentation, just going home, I do the same thing, check in your medicine cabinet. Checking to make sure that those things you have in your home that might be dangerous, those kids don't have access to. So these are all really great things for us to kind of hold ourselves accountable and know what are the risks and protective factors for our kids. So what can you do? What's the positive from this conversation? Well, like I said at the beginning, you are the #1 influence in your child's relationships with drugs and alcohol. So one thing, talking early and often. My kids are 6, nope, he just turned 7 and 8-year-old. I have a 7 and 8-year-old, and we already are having conversations about substance use and how it can be dangerous. Age appropriately is going to be important. Talking to them at dinner, car rides, bedtime, consistent, clear messaging. Clear, not muddled, not it's okay to drink if you're here around me, but if you're there, it's not okay. But if you're here, it's okay. Clear messaging about what you as a family expect as it relates to drugs and alcohol. Practicing out scenarios is another great thing to do, particularly if you have teenagers that are out and about and they're going to parties. Giving them an opportunity to say, if you're at a party and you don't feel comfortable, or if something's going on and they're using drugs and alcohol and you don't want to be around there. One of my students, she has a code, she'll text her mom. If she texts her mom the word turtle, her mom knows that she's going to call her and say, you need to get home now. There's an emergency, you need to get home now. And that gives her an out to back out. I have another student who their parents, they know that if they call them and say, or text them, I need you to pick me up, they will come get them, no questions asked. So talk to your kids about those scenarios and then how you guys can plan an out for them if they need to get away with being able to save face. And I'll tell you why that's important, because y'all remember as teenagers, as young people, your social life is like everything. And sometimes as adults, we forget that. Like it's easy for us to say how we think they should respond, but we have to give them that opportunity to save face if that's something that's important to them and leave a dangerous situation. And then the last thing I would say is don't buy into this teen stereotypes. Have high expectations. With the quotes that or the statistics that I shared with you, whether it was, 34% of 12th graders said that they vaped in the last year. Well, that means over 70% of them said that they didn't. No, over 60%. My math was messed up. But the majority of teens are not using these products. The majority of teens are making healthy choices. And that's something that we need to remind ourselves of and remind our children of. It is quite normal for you to make a healthy choice and choose not to use all of these things, and you'll still have fun and get through your school experience without having to be high or use alcohol. Okay, so I want to ask you this question. When we talk with my students, and I'll say to them, have your parents, have your caregivers, do they talk to you about drugs? Most of the kids will be like, no, we don't talk about drugs and alcohol. But if I ask the parents, their hands go up like, yes, we've had these clear conversations. So here are some of the things that I hear from students when I ask them, have you guys had a conversation about substance use in your home? I will either hear, my parents know I use, this is for my kids that are currently using, trying to make healthier choices. They know I use, but they don't want to know. They suspect that something's going on, but they won't question me. They see the lighter in my room, but they don't want to know. Or I might get, my parents haven't really talked to me about drugs. They just tell me I better not use. That just, you better not do it. And that's kind of how I grew up. There wasn't a conversation. It was just, my mom said you better not do it. And that was the end of it. You might also get C, which is my parents say, you can come to me about anything. But when I do, they flip out or they don't feel comfortable coming to their parents because it's not really a conversation. It's more of a lecture. Or then the last one would be, my parents have talked to me about drugs and we talk often. I see, Lee, that you said, I think C is one of the most common teen statements. Absolutely. They just feel like they're not able to approach their parents, but we are going to work on that today. We're going to come up with some ideas of what we can do so that our kids know that they can come to us and talk to us. I'm curious of what would describe how you would have felt as a teenager. For me, it definitely was there was no conversation. It was B for me. Like, you can't talk about it, just don't do it. Here's the problem with that. There's not room for me to go in and talk to my parents about tough situations and have that important dialogue. So yes, no conversation one way or the other. Yes. Oh, wow. That's tough, right? But we want to change that for our kids. We want them to be able to talk about what's going on in their lives, not just about substance use, but really that's an important tenet for everything they're experiencing. So let's think about this from kind of each age group. Even from preschool, you can start having the conversation with our kids about what we can do to make healthy choices. And so here we go. Preschool age, simple conversation, talking about safe versus not safe. Oh, don't touch that. That's not safe. And it's my job to help keep you safe. Start that conversation early about safe versus not safe, celebrating their ability to make their own decisions. Why is that important? We want kids to practice decision making. We want them to work through the decision making process, helping them to work through their frustrations positively. We're going to talk about this in a bit, but I beg of all of us that have little ones, start early with helping them with emotional regulation. Why? One of the main reasons a lot of my young people that I work with who are using, continue to use, is they don't know how to deal with all those uncomfortable feelings. So as simply as sitting down and talking to them about those uncomfortable feelings and how to work through them as a preschooler is really, really important. And also modeling that for them, right? Modeling how to deal with frustrations positively is important as well. Okay, ages 5 through 8. This is my age group, my kids that I have here at home. Encourage them to participate in activities and sports and a healthy lifestyle. So if we are encouraging healthy living from a young age, it's kind of embedded in them about these healthy activities that they can engage in that also become positive ways to deal with stress long-term down the road. Helping them to develop problem-solving skills. Sometimes for us as parents, it's so easy to say, you need to do this or you should do that. But what if we pause and sit back and say, tell me more about what happened with that situation today at school? That was tricky for you. That was hard. What do you think we should do about that? Engage them in problem solving versus just saying, I'll fix it for you, or this is what you need to do. Because there's going to be a time when we're not with them. And they have to walk through that problem solving process themselves. And so we need to really, really help them to learn those tools and not feel like we have to jump in all the time. Walk them through the process. You do want to talk about the difference between medication that's prescribed versus substances. Talking to them about the fact that, the medication that mama gets from the grocery store is something that I as an adult can buy and I can give to you and keep you safe. by giving you this medication as I'm supposed to. But if somebody else offers you a pill, if your tummy hurts at school or someone else offers you something, you shouldn't take it. Or this medicine's okay because your doctor prescribed it just for you to take a certain way. So you really want to start opening those conversations at an early age. And I love the comment about how some kids get angry when you talk about drugs. And I think, when we start making this a conversation that we have often, then it kind of takes away that kind of, boundary that they put up, because they automatically think it's accusatory and you're like, oh, what are you trying to say? So I love and acknowledge that. That is true. And I have to deal with that quite often when we talk to my kids about substance use in the schools. They put the guard up. But once they know that my job is, I'm here to help them and keep them safe, it gets a little bit easier. 9 to 12, what should we do? Establishing expectations and setting consequences. That is important. That's important of all ages. Kids need to know that things have consequences, and sometimes you don't get to choose your consequences. Practicing refusal skills. Actually walking through refusal skills with your kids. Role playing. Kids at that age still love to role play. Role playing with them. What would you do in a particular situation? I just role played with a bunch of seniors about what they would do when they walk in the bathroom and someone's vaping and it's their friend. How are you going to handle that? So allowing them to practice the refusal skills, sending the message to all kids that no is a complete sentence. So you don't have to explain away why you choose not to do something. If your answer is no, that's a complete sentence, but also walking them through some refusal skills. Giving them the facts on substances is really important. They oftentimes will get the facts from their friends, and those are usually not the right facts. And so we have to be there to kind of buffer that and say, here's what's really going on with those products. No, it is not just, strawberry flavored donut juice in your vape device. There's actually other things in there that can be really harmful to you. Getting to know friends and their friends' families is extremely important. Again, making sure you know where your child is spending their time and who's there at the house when they're spending time with their friends or their friends' family, I think is extremely important. And of course, for ages 13 to 18, clear rules and expectations. I think I've said clear a bunch of times because, again, I'm talking to you about what I hear from kids. And what I hear from kids is that they hear a lot of muddled information. And so the fact that you are clear in how you feel, clear in disapproval of substances, here's something that can kind of help with that anger that we talked about. And I see deflection, could be fear. Anger takes on a lot of things. But sometimes just being ready to listen more than lecture and showing interest in their life. The conversations about substances should not just happen when they're in trouble. This is something that should happen often and be a part of your conversation with your kids about all of the things that you all value, whether you're having family meetings at dinner once a week, or you're having card chats, or however you want to call it. Make it a regular part of your time with the kids in your life, with your family, to really talk about expectations. We need connection so much. I saw someone earlier in the chat talking about how the pandemic has changed connection at school. It's changed connection overall. And so we really need to bring back connection with our families and friends so that they are feeling valued. One of the ways that we can do that is just engaging in conversation. Here's some alternatives to how was your day? Because I don't know about you, but sometimes my kids will get in the car and I'm like, how was your day? Fine. Okay. All right. Where do we go from here? Right. So here's some things you can say as an alternative to really get the conversation going. If you could change one thing about your day today, what would it be? Or tell me your top 2 from your day. Maybe you can ask them, did anyone do something to make you laugh today? Was there something you did today that you felt proud of? Instead of just how was your day, really engaging them in conversation. One of the things that I will often do both with my own children and my kids that I have group with, my teenagers, is we do high lows when we start our group. What was the high of your day? What was the low of your day? The high of my day was, XYZ, and the low of my day was this. It's important that we want to know highs and lows. Why? Again, we're helping our kids understand that sometimes you're going to have a really great day and sometimes not so much. Sometimes it might be tricky and that's okay. Oh, you had a rough day because your teacher yelled at you and you felt upset and embarrassed. Let's talk through that. I see in the chat the question about when you're stuck during a conversation with a child. Oh gosh, that's happened to me. Sometimes you have to just say, if there's that silence and they don't want to talk, I mean, think about how we feel. Sometimes we don't want to talk. But what's important is to say, oh, feels like maybe right now is not a good time. Just know when you want to connect, I'm here. And you can come back to me when you're ready. Right. So then you're putting it in their court. You're allowing them to have some control there. And then circling back to them when time has passed. But that's going to happen. It just we got to practice and keep going. That happened to me yesterday with my child. So I completely can relate. You can also practice conversation starters that are specific to substance use, but really just starting with the basics and making connection with them is important. So in the chat, list for me what you think some reasons are that kids choose to use drugs and alcohol. What are the reasons why someone might use? And there's some on the screen, but if you have anything different, you can put that in the chat. Why would someone say, I want to use, I'm gonna smoke with friends. I see peer pressure, trying to make friends. Big one, self-medicate, anxiety, forgetting emotional pain, absolutely. Some of the other ones that we have up here are help with boredom. Oh, I love that. Trying to feeling misunderstood, trying to fit in, escape. For some kids, it is socializing, coping with loss or failure. It's important for us as adults to realize that drugs are tools that may serve a function for some of these kids, and they are getting something out of it. The key is for us to understand what are they getting out of this, and then to try to help them replace it with a healthier behavior, especially for our kids that are dealing with stress, anxiety, trying to escape. If I will ask my students, kids who have, gone way too far, they've been in the legal system, they've been kicked out of school. If you could find a way to deal with your stress, your anger, to escape, to connect with others without using drugs, would you want it? Would you want to find a healthier way? They always say yes. So again, we need to reiterate to our kids the importance of finding healthy ways to deal with some of those things. One of the things that we can do to help with that, and this is a big one, is teaching resiliency. And I'll explain it to you the way I explained it to my 6-year-old when we talked about resiliency. I said, resiliency is a fancy word that just means knowing how to bounce back, knowing how to deal with a tough time. And I would tell her there's always going to be something hard. First of all, I think we do need to prep our kids to let them know that hard things happen, and that's okay. But I would tell her, there's going to be something hard that happens, and we've got egg people. And those are the people that, when something difficult happens, when a hard thing happens, they fall and they crack, right? They're just like, they don't know how to make it through. Everything is shattered. Their whole day is just awful. They don't quite know how to move through those tough times. But then when you're resilient, which means you're able to deal with difficult situations, you're able to push forward, you're like a bouncy ball. And yeah, something's going to happen. You may crash and hit the floor, but you're able to continue to bounce and move forward, right? And so we have to teach our kids the importance of resiliency, that failures happen, but it doesn't mean you're a failure, that success, as you see on the screen, is not just a straight arrow. Sometimes it takes like all kind of ways to get to the right thing, whether it's their math test when they're in 3rd grade or other things that they have to deal with. We have to teach our kids resiliency. Some great examples, talk to them if they like sports about Michael Jordan. How many times he missed the winning game shot? I think he missed 300 winning game shots in his career. I think he didn't make the high school basketball team, but he was resilient. He kept going. If you have a kid that loves art, talk about Walt Disney. Walt Disney was told that he would never be hired. He was not a great cartoonist. And then we have Disney World. He kept going. He was resilient. He bounced back. This is important. Connecting it to substance use. When I want to escape because I don't feel like I can be successful and do things, if I've got that resiliency and coping skills, I'm less likely to turn to drugs and alcohol. to escape these feelings. How many of you know what your children's coping skills are? How many of you know what your kids like to do or try to do to help them deal with stress? I did not know for my son, but for my daughter, she likes to go in her room, be alone, and she likes to color. Talk to your kids about what their coping skills are or what a coping skill even is. That, when they have stress, when they have things going on, what are some ways that they can kind of cope to help them move forward? These are things that my students shared that work for them. Giving them permission to have a good cry. That was a big thing, especially in my culture. You don't cry, you hold it all in. You don't talk about sad feelings, you just move on. But then it's like that soda bottle where you don't let anything escape and you shake it up and shake it up. Eventually, it's going to explode. So you need to really try to push forward with helping them to deal with hard times and talking to them about ways to deal with stress that are positive and not just something that is going to help them escape, like using drugs and alcohol. And these are real life things that we do with my kids who are trying to turn their lives around from substance use. We're teaching them coping skills. We're teaching them goal setting. We're helping to reframe what failure looks like so that they know it's just teaching them how to kind of move forward from tough things. And so these are things that as parents you can do to empower your kids as well. Now, oftentimes you will get the question of, oh, okay, you want me to have these conversations with my kids, but what if they ask me about my own substance use? So here's what I would say. First of all, that is a personal family choice up to you to decide what you want to choose to disclose. For some parents, they say, I don't want to talk about my use. They may say something like, this isn't about my past, this is about your future. And so what I did in the past didn't matter. That's one way that one could respond about your own use. Research shows us the best answer is to be honest. You can share with your kids why you used, what you learned from it, and why you want them to make a different choice. My father struggled with addiction all of his life. And so, to hear him say, don't use drugs, but see that he was using drugs was quite the contradiction. And there wasn't a lot of conversation there. So it is really a personal choice, but whatever you choose to do, there is some great information at drugfree.org that can walk you through step by step how to talk to your kids, like literally a dialogue if you have used before, if you're in recovery, which is something to be extremely proud of, how to have those conversations with your kids about substance use. All right, some warning signs. If you are concerned after hearing this, that maybe there's something going on, you want to look for physical changes to your child. Are they looking more tired, changes to their body? Behavior and attitude changes, which oftentimes people will say, well, I have a teenager. There's attitude changes all the time, but you really want to look at the baseline. Like as a baseline, are they acting really, really different? Productivity changes. So were they really involved in sports? Now they don't care. Were they really involved in school? Now they don't care as much. And then evidence of paraphernalia. I know that's a hard subject for some folks, but I have a lot of parents of kids that I work with where they see things, but they just don't know how to they don't want to call it out. And there's no shame in that. As parents, we are all walking the path to do our best. And if you are concerned that your child is using, reach out and get the help that you need. Take action. Ask them straight up if they're using any substances and investigate further. Enforce consequences for negative behavior that you've already talked about, because these are conversations you've had before. And then if necessary, seek professional help, get a behavior health assessment, reach out to your school. Brevard County has some amazing resources out there for you. So please reach out to your school community to get some support. And I love this. I think I'll end on what Jennifer said, trust your gut. You want to trust your gut. If you feel like there's something going on, ask them and talk to them about it. And if you're establishing open conversation the entire time, it's going to make that conversation a lot easier. Well, here's some websites for you for if you need additional resources. And at this time, Caitlin, I think that wraps up my part of the presentation, but I'm definitely open for any questions that everyone might have. I'd love to answer them if I can.
I see one question here that asks, what disciplinary techniques will you use when you are not getting through to them?
So, when it comes to disciplinary techniques, that's going to be unique to each family as to how they choose to discipline their child. We focus more on how you can kind of make that connection with your child. And so I will straight up often say, you don't have to be the only one that's trying to get through to your child. One, look at your circle of influence in your home. Maybe during this conversation right now, grandma is a better person to connect with. Maybe during this conversation right now, you need to connect with someone at school who can help you through that. So I think that the disciplinary piece is often unique to each family as to how they try to approach it. But if you come to this conversation more from the framework of let's work together. I'm here to talk to you. We're a team. I want to walk you through and support you. You can kind of get a better outcome. Now, of course, if you are in a situation where your child is engaging in harmful behavior, then that's going to look different. And you do need to follow through with that, with whatever consequences that you have in your home, or reach out to get support on what that could look like.
How can you tell if your child is vaping? Because
that's a good one. That's a good one. What I would say when it comes to vaping, and especially vaping at home, some things to look for, and I think I had another slide that had that information. You want to look for, this is going to sound interesting, but more frequent trips to the bathroom with the fan running, okay? Because that's a place where they may vape. If you're smelling light, faint smells, fruity smells when you're walking into their bedroom, that could be a sign of vaping. You want to look and see if you're seeing interesting like chargers or tools, because sometimes with the rechargeable ones, they like to take them apart to add more of the vape juice to the tank. So you might see interesting tools that you haven't seen around. And so definitely looking for those kinds of things. And then any behavioral changes that you might see as well. It does contain nicotine. So if you're seeing them making constant trips to the bathroom or things like that, it might be a sign that, they're doing something's going on and they could be vaping.
I have a question for you, Tasha.
Sure.
So what does cannabis use disorder look like? When you said that, I had never heard that before.
Yes, well, and that's actually a term that we, as an organization, I'm just becoming familiar with because of the influx of kids that we have in there. But it's going to look like any other a disorder where folks are addicted to using a substance. What we see with our kids that are addicted to cannabis is, like we talked about, that amotivational syndrome, no longer caring about their grades, their school. Their first priority is use, frequent daily use without concern for risk. And so that might be the kid that is smoking at school, smoking at home despite use. So when we're talking about cannabis use disorder, this wouldn't be the young person that maybe goes to a party and smokes every once in a while. This is a student basically who has become dependent on marijuana use to get through the day.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I know we're just about out of time, but I wonder what would be some signs that we would have, like, children reach a certain age and they want to go to their friends and spend the night and do those kinds of things. What do you advise parents? Because I say be cautious, only because I've raised two sons and I now know what I didn't know before. But
Yes.
What do you think?
When it comes to going and doing overnights with friends, I too believe in being cautious. I think when it comes to connecting with your child, connecting with friends and families, you have to know the family, and you have to be clear that the family shares your expectations and your same values when it comes to substance use. I've seen, if I'm being honest, quite a few of the young people that I work with who they are using products at other families' homes who may not be home. So if you do feel like you want to allow your child to spend the night over at a friend's house, you need to make sure that you've connected with the family, not just the kid, but the actual family, the parents and the guardians, and that you're clear on what your expectations are, because a lot of times that's where things often kind of go down. So really being clear and connecting with the families, I think, is the most important thing.
All right, are there any more questions before we wrap up? All right, so thank you guys so much. And Tasha, thank you so much for your presentation today. I learned a lot. I hope that everybody else learned a lot as well. Oh yes, thank you, Christina. So this presentation will be posted to YouTube, but again, I put in the chat if you guys want me to send you a direct link. You can go ahead and email me and I'll send that to you and you can share it as you see fit. And I hope you guys have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I appreciate the opportunity. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.